This video explains the entire timeline of Westeros, not just the events of Game of Thrones, not just the dragons and civil war shown in House of the Dragon, and not just the Wandering Knight era of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. This is the single connected story that links all three. Most people see these as separate chapters, but in reality, Westeros has always been struggling with one question. How do you stop the end of the world when the world refuses to remember that it already almost ended once? To answer that, we have to go back to a time before thrones, before dragons, before humans ruled anything at all. 12,000 years before Eddard Stark was born, Westeros belonged to the Children of the Forest. They were small, ancient beings, deeply tied to the land itself. They worshipped the old gods, carved faces into weirwood trees, and believed memory was sacred. To them, history wasn't written, it was grown. For thousands of years, the children lived in balance with the world. Then humans arrived. They were called the First Men, and they crossed from Essos using a land bridge known as the Arm of Dorne. They didn't arrive with evil intentions, they arrived with families, animals, and the desire to settle. But settlement still brings destruction. The First Men cut down weirwood trees for lumber. They hunted sacred forests. They spread rapidly without understanding what they were breaking. The children tried diplomacy. It failed. War followed, and it lasted centuries. The First Men had numbers and bronze weapons. The children had magic. As the war dragged on, the children grew desperate. Their green seers gathered and performed a ritual so powerful that it reshaped the world itself. The Arm of Dorne shattered, breaking the land into what we now call the Stepstones. But the magic came too late. The First Men were already entrenched in Westeros. Eventually, both sides reached the same conclusion. Total victory would mean extinction. So they met. On the Isle of Faces, in the center of the God's Eye, the leaders of the First Men and the children forged an agreement remembered as the Pact. The First Men would rule the open lands, the children would keep the deep forests, the weirwood trees would be protected, and humans would worship the old gods. For a time, the world stabilized. This period became known as the Age of Heroes, an era of semi-mythical figures whose names still echo through Westeros. Houses like Stark, Lannister, and Arryn trace their origins to this age. But peace created complacency, and complacency made the world fragile. Around 8,000 years before Aegon's conquest, winter came, and did not end. Years passed without spring. Snow buried villages, crops failed. People didn't die in battles, they died quietly in their homes. From the far north, something ancient returned. The White Walkers. They didn't raid or conquer, they erased life. Entire villages vanished, and when survivors returned, they didn't return alone. The dead rose. Steel blades shattered against ice armor. Men who fell in battle stood back up and turned against them. Entire villages vanished during the long night. Not burned, not looted, just gone. When survivors finally reached safer lands, they told the same story again and again. The dead did not stay dead. Fathers rose against sons. Brothers stood back up after falling in battle. Steel swords did nothing. Panic spread south faster than the cold itself. Kings of the First Men gathered their banners and marched north, believing numbers would save them. But every battle ended the same way. The living grew weaker, the dead grew stronger. It was only when the Children of the Forest intervened that the tide turned around. They brought weapons made of dragonglass, volcanic stone sharper than steel. When dragonglass struck a White Walker, the creature shattered, and the dead it commanded collapsed with it. This knowledge reached a man remembered only as the last hero. According to legend, he set out with a small group of companions, searching for the Children of the Forest. One by one, his companions died. His horse froze beneath him. His sword broke. But he survived long enough to bring dragonglass back to humanity. At the Battle for the Dawn, the living finally forced the White Walkers to retreat into the far north. Not destroyed, driven away. That distinction mattered more than anyone realized at the time. When the war ended, the world did not celebrate for long. The survivors understood something terrifying. If the enemy had come once, it could come again. One man took this lesson more seriously than anyone else. His name was Brandon the Builder. Brandon lived during the aftermath of the Long Night. He saw ruined villages, abandoned lands, and a world that had barely survived extinction. He did not believe victory was permanent, so instead of ruling through conquest, he built. First, he raised Winterfell, a fortress designed for endless winter, built over hot springs to keep its walls from freezing. Then he began a project so massive that even kings called it madness. A wall of ice, stone, and ancient magic, stretching from one sea to the other. The wall was not meant to stop wildlings. It was meant to stop the dead. To guard it, Brandon helped found the Night's Watch, a brotherhood of men who would give up land, family, and titles in exchange for a single purpose: guard the realms of men. And he founded House Stark, binding his bloodline to the north with a promise rather than a crown. Their words were not political, they were historical. Winter is coming. For 8,000 years, the walls stood, and slowly, people forgot why. While Westeros buried its fear behind ice and memory faded into legend, a very different thing was happening across the narrow sea. In Essos, on a volcanic peninsula known as Valyria, humans discovered dragons. At first, they were shepherds living in the shadow of volcanoes. Over time, through blood magic and experimentation, they learned to bind dragons to their will. This changed everything. Dragons were not symbols, they were weapons. With dragons, Valyria built the greatest empire the world had ever known. They destroyed the Giscari Empire, enslaved nations, forged Valyrian steel, and reshaped continents. For nearly 5,000 years, Valyria ruled through fear and fire. And then, in a single day, it ended. The doom of Valyria came without warning. The 14 flames erupted simultaneously. Mountains split open. Cities vanished beneath the smoking sea. Every Dragonlord family died. Every record burned. Every secret was lost. Except one. 12 years earlier, a young girl named Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of Valyria's destruction. Her father believed her. House Targaryen sold their lands and fled to Dragonstone, a bleak island off the coast of Westeros. Other Dragonlords laughed at them. 12 years later, they were all dead. The Targaryens survived with a handful of dragons and the knowledge that dreams could save bloodlines. For nearly a century, they waited, watching Westeros remain divided into 7 constantly warring kingdoms. Then, Aegon had a dream of his own. In it, he saw darkness pouring out of the north. He saw the world ending in ice, and he believed that only a united Westeros could survive what was coming. So, he conquered. Not for glory, for preparation. With his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys and their dragons, Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes, Aegon burned armies and melted castles. Harrenhal, the greatest fortress ever built, fell in a single night. At the Field of Fire, 55,000 men burned alive. The kings of Westeros knelt, not because Aegon was just, but because dragons made resistance meaningless. Only Dorne resisted successfully, using terrain and patience rather than armies. When the war ended, Aegon forged the Iron Throne from surrendered swords and ruled from King's Landing. And a secret was passed down from king to heir. The winter would return. For over a century, the Targaryens ruled with dragons, and the realm remained stable. Then they turned on each other. The civil war remembered as the Dance of the Dragons was not fought for survival, it was fought for pride. Dragon fought dragon in the skies, entire cities burned, bloodlines collapsed in a matter of years. When the war ended, Both sides had lost. Most of the dragons were dead. The survivors were smaller, weaker, and sickly. When Aegon III Targaryen took the throne as a child, he hated dragons. He had watched his mother die because of them. During his reign, the last dragon died. And with dragons gone, magic faded from the world. This created a new Westeros, a weaker Westeros, a world without nuclear weapons. This is the era explored in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Kings ruled through alliances instead of fear, lords grew bolder, succession became dangerous. When Aegon IV Targaryen legitimized his bastards out of spite, he shattered the realm's stability. The Blackfyre rebellions followed, decades of civil war. From this chaos rose Brynden Rivers. He crushed rebellions through spies and fear. Eventually, he was sent to the Wall, and then beyond it. By the time Jon Snow was born, the world had forgotten everything. The Night's Watch was a shadow of what it had been. The Wall was ignored. Dragons were myths. Then, the dead returned. History repeated itself, and the story that began 12,000 years earlier finally came due.